You want to spend $115 or $33? A few months ago, I purchased 3 of these Rockler parallel clamps, and I really liked the way they looked, the videos that they had, and I got these things in. We've used them a few times, not really that in love with them. They're kind of clunky, not really what I was really hoping for. But then I ran across Lee over at Busted Knuckle Woodworks, and I watched a video that he did where he homemade some cauls. And I was like, man, I really like the way that looks. Let's give that a try and see if it works. So as far as pricing goes, for the Rockler parallel clamps that I bought, I spent a little over $350 for 3 of them. We bought everything we needed for materials and hardware for these 3 cauls, $105 out the door. You guys might not know this, but Ryan and I are starting to do bigger glue ups now. We're getting kind of into the table industry. We needed something that would really help us with big glue ups, and we thought these Rockler clamps would be the ticket. Well, they work, but they're just kind of clunky, kind of over-engineered, a lot of mechanisms that move that make it kind of difficult to use. So that's when I saw Lee's video, and I really liked the simplicity. I like the adjustable factor there where we can do thicker glue ups, longer glue ups for a lot less money, and I think it's a winner.
The first place we went was Home Depot, but they actually didn't have the super struts. So we ended up going to Lowe's and we got 2 of these 10-foot super struts. These are 12 gauge, which was the thickest, most beefy ones they had. For the carriage bolts, we went with 8 inches. And we did that because we wanted to have the option to glue up something really thick if we needed to. So the 8-inch carriage bolts gives us about a 4-inch gap that we can use. But to be honest, that's pretty big. So we'll probably end up going back and getting 5 or 6-inch carriage bolts just for the standard stuff we're going to do more often. So these pieces are 10 foot long, which is 120 inches. So we decided to make 2 cuts at 40 inches each. That gives us 3 40-inch cauls. Now we used the chop saw first, and that didn't work all that well. This is a really old chop saw and the blade isn't all that great. So we ended up using a metal cutting grinder wheel and the flex grinder, and that actually worked a lot better. We just had to flip it and make 2 cuts per piece. Dad and I are woodworkers, not metal workers, but make sure that if you're doing something like this, notice Dad's got his apron on and he's got his face shield on. These metal pieces will fly up and get in your eyes really quick, and trust me on this, it sucks. I've had to have my eye scraped twice because I wasn't wearing safety gear. Once they were cut, then we just filed down all the sharp edges, that way we could handle them and not cut ourselves. Once the pieces were cut, then we just installed the carriage bolts and the washers and nuts. The only thing you really got to make sure is that they're lined up evenly. Now notice the carriage bolt, it actually fits right in that hole, so you can crank on these things and you can tighten them down without having to use 2 wrenches. You probably could use wing nuts, but we really wanted the option to crank on these things if we had some pretty warped boards.
Hey guys, I want to just take a second here. Ryan and I have a big goal of hitting 100,000 subscribers this year. So if you can do us a favor, hit that bell icon, click that subscribe button. We've got some big projects, some really cool stuff coming up you don't want to miss.
Now we're going to glue up a redwood board. We didn't have necessarily a purpose for this, but I'm sure we'll find something to do with it. But we really wanted to try these cauls out and see how they work as opposed to the Rockler clamps. I got to tell you guys, these things really worked well. We made a few mistakes here. Like number 1 is Dad put that clamp in the middle, and you'll see that we fixed that once we tried to put the caul in the middle there. Installing these things is really easy on the sides. You don't have to take them apart, but you do need to open them up enough to where it'll slide on there. And you can see right there that as Dad's cranking it down, it's actually flattening those boards out really well. We were a little bit concerned about the glue sticking to this, but everything we bought is galvanized, so we should have waxed the edges on it, and we ended up not doing that, but it still really wasn't an issue. Now you can see that the far left board on this one is really tweaked, but as Dad cranks it down, it flattens this thing out amazingly well. So much better than the Rockler clamps. We were really impressed with how well this did at getting the board as flat as we can before the sanding operation. You can see here that the seams are pretty good. Obviously, you would never just pop your clamps off and start carving or start doing what you're going to do to it. You have to surface a little bit. But my gosh, man, the difference between this and anything else we used is unbelievable. Now for the middle one, it's a little bit complicated. You have to put the bolts in first and slide that thing in sideways, then flip it up. Mainly because the bolts were 8 inches long. So it took some fumbling around to really kind of get it down, and the more we use these, the better it's going to get. But we put a caul on each side and one dead in the middle, and then put clamps in between those. And I think that's the ticket right there, as opposed to just putting a clamp in the middle. It freaking worked great. The one big downfall of these is the fact that they add so much weight to your board. So if you do a glue up and then want to move that out of the way and keep working, it's a good idea to get somebody to help you lift them because they are pretty stinking heavy. But taking them off was nice and simple. I was a little nervous about them sticking to the board, but we didn't have that issue at all. And I think it'll even be better if we wax the bottom of those rails. But you can see that just right out of the clamps, the glue up seams are really good. This is definitely going to take some sanding, but there's nothing you can do that won't take some sanding. Compared to everything else we've used, this is top notch.
So there you go, guys. Hope that is helpful. Now let me mention a couple things. When you guys saw us using those, that's the first time we ever used them. So we were kind of fumbling, trying to figure the whole thing out. So we'll do it a little bit different going forward. We'll be a little bit more efficient and prepare a little bit better before we get that glue all set on that board. Another thing that I'll definitely do different is I will wax down those rails. That'll keep that glue from sticking. Even though those are galvanized and that glue didn't stick very much, having those things greased down or waxed down, I think will save a lot of scrape off from the glue later on. So we learned a lot. All in all, man, these things are awesome. They are so much better than the Rockler version at a fraction of the cost. So I highly recommend, if you're doing very many big glue ups, guys, it's definitely worth your time to put some of these together. So I hope you guys liked it. You guys will see these things on future videos, I'm sure of that. Thanks again for watching, guys. If you have any suggestions, any comments, email me, Eric@makeawoodsign.com. We love you. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.